impacted the odds of survival, nature had instead made the Asalamir species strong in the Force. So strong, in fact, that several of the creatures acting in concert could create a force bubble encompassing kilometers rather than meters. In a sense, the Jedi Order had done the same on a galactic scale, Plagueis believed, by bathing the galaxy in the energy of the light side of the Force, or more accurately, by fashioning a force bubble that had prevented infiltration by the dark side, until Tenebrous' master had succeeded in bursting the bubble, or at least shrinking it. How the Order's actions could be thought of as balancing the Force had baffled generations of Sith, who harbored no delusions regarding the Force's ability to self-regulate. The Yanchori former convict wasn't the only new addition to Plagueis' island facility. In the 11 years that had elapsed since the capture of Venemus and the recruitment of Sidious, Plagueis had collected more than a dozen beings of diverse species and had been subjecting them to a wide range of experiments involving volition, telepathy, healing, regeneration, and life extension, with some promising results. As for the Bith would-be Sith Lord, he was alive and well, though kept comatose more often than not, and always under the watchful photoreceptors of 114D or a host of custodial droids. Plagueis hadn't lost interest in Venemus by any means, but the Yanchori's immunity to force suggestion, an immunity the species shared with Hutts, Toydarians, and others, had provided him with a new line of investigation. Unlike Isilamiri, which created a force bubble in the presence of danger, the Yanchori were in perpetual state of involuntary immunity to force suggestion. The fact that immunity was in a sense hardwired into them meant that the ability was an adaptation prompted by a past threat to the survival of the species. To Plagueis, it meant that the Yanchori's midichlorians had evolved to provide protection to a species that was naturally strong in the Force. If that were indeed the case, then the Yanchori were living proof that the Sith of the Bane line had been on the right path from the very start. For while toppling the Jedi Order and the Republic was essential to the task of restoring order to the galaxy, that goal belonged to the realm of the ordinary, to the world that was nothing more than a byproduct of the eternal struggle between the light and dark forces, both of which were beyond any concepts of good or evil. The greater goal of the Sith involved toppling the Force itself and becoming the embodiment of the galaxy's animated principle. It had been theorized by Jedi and Sith alike that balance between the light and dark sides was actually under the guidance of a group of discorporate entities, the ones called the Celestials perhaps, who had merged themselves with the Force thousands of generations earlier and had continued to guide the fate of the galaxy ever since. In effect, a higher order of intermediaries, whose powers were beyond the understanding of mortal beings. But many Sith viewed the notion with disdain, for the theoretical existence of such a group had little bearing on the goal of making the Force subservient to the will of an enlightened elite. Only the Sith understood that sentient life was on the verge of a transformative leap, that through the manipulation of midichlorians, or the overthrow of the forceful group that supervised them, the divide between organic life and the Force could be bridged, and death could be erased from the continuum. As evidenced by those few lords who had managed to perpetuate their spirits after physical death, foremost among them Emperor Vitiate, who was said to have lived 1,000 years, the ancient Sith had come halfway across that bridge. But those few had been so focused on worldly power that they had ended up trapping themselves between realms, that they had never provided the Order with guidance from beyond, attested to the fact that their influence had been negligible and had long since faded from the world. In the same way that the pre-Bane Sith had been responsible for their own extinction, the great dark side lords of the past had doomed themselves to the nether realm through their attempts to conquer death by feeding off the energies of others, rather than by tapping the deepest strata of the Force and learning to speak the language of the midichlorians. Plagueis was finally learning to do that, and was just beginning to learn how to persuade, prompt, cajole, and coax them into action. Already he could command them to promote healing, and now he had been successful in enticing them to lower their defenses.
More power. More fun. In the new, more powerful 2021 Subaru Crosstrek.
I am but a mirror whose only purpose is to show you what your own eyes cannot yet see.
Whenever people list their favorite well-written character in gaming, Kreia tends to be brought up as a shining example. With her Shakespearean mannerism and Machiavellian attitude, she is, without a doubt, one of the most interesting and fleshed out characters in gaming. Her reputation primarily comes from her philosophy that tends to be often misunderstood, both in Allworld and in the story itself. However, no matter how well written of a character she may be, Kreia does not exist in a vacuum. To be able to fully understand Kreia and her philosophy, some background information about the Jedi and Sith ideologies and their differences is required. In the original Star Wars movie, there was never any defined philosophical distinction between the Jedi and Sith. We only understood that the Jedi were good and that the Sith were evil. There are some thematic hints, such as the Jedi being in tune with nature, while the Empire and the Sith rely on cold technology. The first hint of a philosophical explanation came from Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back.
Yes, the Jedi's strength flows from the Force, but beware of the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force are they. Easily they flow, quick to join you in a fight. If once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you it will, as it did Obi-Wan's apprentice.
Vader, is the dark side stronger?
No. But easier, more seductive.
But how am I to know the good side from the bad?
You will know when you are calm, at peace, passive. A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never attack.
Later, new material was added in the Star Wars expanded universe over the years that fleshed out the Jedi and Sith. But it was only when the game Knights of the Old Republic was released that the Jedi and Sith were each given a coherent ideology. The core of each faction's belief can be understood from their code that outline the principal tenets of how one should live their life in relation to the Force. Let's start with the Jedi Code.
All Jedi must know the Code. Its tenets are the fundamental teachings of our order. Think and meditate on these truths, apprentice. There is no emotion. There is peace. There is no ignorance. There is knowledge. There is no passion. There is serenity. There is no chaos. There is harmony. There is no death. There is the Force.
By itself, the Jedi Code makes little sense and has brought up a lot of confusion. For example, the very first line, "There is no emotion, there is peace," is often misinterpreted as the code saying that there's no such thing as emotions. It is only when you add the word "when" to each sentence that the Jedi Code becomes understandable. When there is no emotion, there is peace. When there is no ignorance, there is knowledge. When there is no passion, there is serenity. When there is no chaos, there is harmony. Essentially, most of the Jedi Code is repeating the same axiom that when there is no conflict or emotions, peace is achieved. The last line of the code could be taken as literal. There is no death, there is the Force. When you die, you become one with the Force. But it could also be understood that when there is no death, there is the Force, meaning that everything that is living is connected to the Force. Both interpretations are valid. The real-world equivalent of the Jedi Code is Buddhist philosophy, which is appropriate, as the Jedi are essentially space wizard samurai monks. The Force, itself a living energy found in all things that binds the universe together, is similarly shared in Buddhist philosophy, called prana. It's also commonly known as chi energy and other different names. By being at peace, you can become in tune with life and the universe. Meditation is a key aspect of Buddhism that is often used by the Jedi to center themselves and remain calm. Buddhism has myriads of teachings and schools of thoughts, but the core shared belief is that all suffering is caused by desires, which creates conflict. Much like the Jedi, Buddhism preaches tranquility, peace, and only using your strength for self-defense. In contrast, the Sith never had much in terms of philosophy in any of the movies. The Emperor was evil for the sake of evil, and Vader was nothing more than a broken man in a shell. It is only in the first Knights of the Old Republic game that the Sith were given a proper ideological foundation that went beyond the simple grapples of being evil. On Korriban, the Sith Code is introduced as an alternative to the Jedi Code.
Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall free me.
The first line, that peace is a lie, there is only passion, is a direct refutation of the Jedi axiom that peace can only be found if there are no emotions. And in turn, it becomes the axiom of the Sith.
The Jedi would have you believe that peace is a desirable goal. That peace of the spirit is the way the Force is mastered. That a lack of conflict betters man. We know different. It is our passion, our hate, and our desire that fuels the Force. It is conflict that improves the lot of civilization and single being both. Conflict forces one to better oneself. It forces change, growth, adaptation, evolution, or death. These are not our laws, but the universe's. Without conflict, you have only stagnation.
Just like the Jedi, the Sith equally follow a real-world equivalent, the philosophy of Nietzsche. He similarly valued conflict to better oneself, to use your will to create meaning. The well-known quote, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," very much defines the Sith as an ideology. By affirming your life and imposing your will, you can change the world and mold it as you see fit with your power. This is the ideological groundwork of both philosophies in an idealized manner. And, like all philosophies at the conceptual and abstract level, it is only how we understand and how they are applied that we see their strength and failings. So now that we have some basic context for the Jedi and Sith, we can dive deeper into what makes Kreia so interesting. Among the canon of Star Wars, Kreia is unique because she experienced the pinnacles of the Jedi and Sith and saw their failings. Kreia's life history gives us an insight to what she learned among those groups. However, her life story isn't told in a linear fashion. We need to piece together the clues that are scattered throughout the game. Since the early days, there is a popular theory that Kreia is the Jedi Master Eren Kai, who trained Revan as a Padawan. This is correct, but it's not the complete truth. What is important to understand is that Kreia was known as Eren Kai in the early days of her life. I'll explain why later. Kai was a historian and Jedi Master. She strongly believed in the Jedi Code, but found that it lacked something. She saw that the Jedi Order were failing their students, as many kept falling to the dark side continuously. The allure of power and the call of the dark side is always present, but it doesn't explain why the Jedi would constantly fall despite their training. There was something missing in the Jedi Code itself. Unlike the rest of the Jedi that ignored the teachings of the Sith and viewed it as taboo, Kai learned the contrast to see if she could strengthen the Jedi by understanding what made the Sith so alluring. When you ask Kreia about Atris, she mentions that Atris mirrors a stage of her own past life.
Because Atris's path is one I walked long ago, and it is a chapter of my life that has been read and closed. She has taken the first steps, I think. We shall see. Surely you felt the righteous anger, the spoken judgments, the lack of forgiveness. I was a historian once, gathering the relics of the Jedi, learning the ancient mysteries. Always there were more questions. One quickly learns that the Jedi Code does not give all the answers. If you are to truly understand, then you will need the contrast, not adherence to a single idea. That is why Atris and the other